you have audience, right? And this is the thing, all eyes are on from day one,
Yeah.
and the expectation is that you're just going to sell incredible numbers forever. Obviously, in reality, that doesn't happen. You fluctuate. There's some good rate of sale at some moments, then not. Maybe the product sucks, and actually you don't have a very good rate of sale. Maybe you have. I talked about it in the newsletter, and I did a TikTok about it yesterday. How like the biggest challenge for Rods, well, in his company, the same way it's for Sidemen's products and everything else, is how do you sustain for the long term, right? Because ultimately, launching is easy.
Hmm.
These are creators, these are creative teams, these are like launching is easy. The hard bit is after a year, 2 years, 3 years, when like sales are slowing down, you need to support them, or retailers are getting frustrated because they bought a lot of stock thinking it would sell out forever and then it didn't. And obviously every hype piece dies off. So the key then is financially, and this is the key, it's not even creatively supporting it, it's financially supporting it.
Hmm.
And therefore you have to have a partner with deep enough pockets and long enough intent to be able to fund what will be sunk costs for a long time. Because ultimately, right, coffee makes no money.
Yeah. Hmm.
Prime makes no, like in real terms with retailers, retail makes no money. Retail makes very little
Yeah.
unless you're doing obscene numbers. For example, Mr. Beast does 250 million in Feastable sales, or did last year through retailers. Great, amazing. Hershey's does 4 billion or something crazy like that, right? But they do 250 million. And of that, they made 20 million in profit
Wow.
into the company. And from that, they still have to pay the marketing team, their sales team, their CEO. Don't get me wrong, 20 million is a lot of money. That's good. But from 250 million in sales, you see this. And the amount of money they have to pump into marketing, they're sponsoring things like the charity match. They did their partnerships in the NBA. They're doing all their content production. All of that's coming out of that 20 million. And
Yeah.
yes, don't get me wrong, that's a good amount of money to play with to build a brand. But that's a under 10% margin into the company that owns the brand. And then from that, you've then got to fund and support the whole building of the brand, right?
Yeah.
And that's at the highest level. So like you're looking at an 8% margin gross, and then what's your net margin in that company? It might be, I don't know. You might maybe spending like 10, another 10 mil. Maybe you're left with 10 million. Don't get me wrong, that's a good amount of money in a company at the end of the day. Great, right? Maybe, but probably less because they're putting it all back in. But
Hmm.
ultimately, it's like you realize that's at the highest level. And that's also with a product that they've managed, I think, to get decent margins because they run most of the supply chain themselves,
Yeah.
which cuts. So if you're not, none of these creative brands, I will in these one, will not be running their own supply. Of course not. It costs so much to build the factories, to get supply chain going. You need a partner to do it with you. All of our brands are with partnerships because no way are the Sidemen going to invest in a factory to make cereal. What does that do though? Like, why would we? It's stupid, right? But what that does do is it means your margin comes all the way down. So
Right.
you're left with even less because the person who's taking the risk of manufacturing then collects most of the money. Now, great if you're looking to build a brand for the long term. It's an IP play. You're trying to drive long term value in the IP and sell the IP one day through volume and sales, etc. You're not really worried about it making money. You don't really need the money for it to grow. But still, even with that, and even with low cost, you need to be able to fund it. And these brands to do well require millions. They do. They require millions and millions and millions. And somebody has to pay that. So either it's a partner who does it and who funds it, but then, are they incentivized enough, etc.? Do they really, are they in it for the long haul? Do they have the pockets? Maybe. Or it's the creator who has to fund it. Most creators don't have millions sitting in the bank.
Hmm.
So you're stuck in this trap where you're like, this needs a lot of money. And this is specifically for physical products. Now, I believe most creators should avoid physical products like the plague because they're a headache, unless you have the size like the Sidemen to attract the best partners. However, they should be getting into digital products. Why did we all go into physical products? Why did we all launch drinks brands that cost £2 at retail and you net 40p a can, 30p a can? It's stupid. I don't know why we all did it. Whereas in reality, and yes, there's brand building value, of course, but in reality, it's silly if you think about it, just on a business model perspective, because creators have digital audiences that are scaled globally. Why do we not go into software? Why do we not go into tech? Why do we not go into more things like Side Plus? And when you look at the numbers, you're going from maybe an 8% net margin to an 80% net margin,
Right.
90% margin.
Yeah.
So you can get, and then you can get cash flow plus off the back of cash flow, you can get, value in the business. And obviously in tech, where everything's driven by, ARR and everything else, you could be in a position where your annual recurring revenue is driving your valuation at a 10x multiple.